Imagine standing on a quiet railway platform in the German countryside. The year is 1931. The air is cold and smells faintly of coal smoke, the scent of the industrial age. You are waiting for the express train to Berlin. You expect to see the usual sight that has defined travel for 100 years, a massive black iron locomotive, towering and heavy, huffing steam and ash as it drags a line of steel wagons into the station. The ground usually shakes with the heavy, rhythmic pounding of pistons. But today, you hear something strange. It starts as a low drone in the distance, like a swarm of angry bees. Then it grows louder, transforming into a terrifying roar. It sounds like a fighter plane diving out of the clouds to attack the station. Suddenly, a silver flash screams past the platform. It moves so fast that your eyes struggle to track it. It doesn't look like a train. It looks like a bullet made of aluminum. It has no smokestack. It has no visible driving rods. It has no wheels that you can see. And most terrifying of all, at the very back of this silver machine, there is a massive wooden propeller. It is spinning so fast, it is invisible. It slices the air, creating a hurricane of wind that nearly knocks you off your feet and blinds you with dust. This was not a science fiction movie. This was the Schienenzeppelin, the rail Zeppelin. It remains one of the most beautiful, fastest and most dangerous machines ever put on tracks. This is the story of the day engineers tried to mix a train with a fighter plane and why this silver monster was doomed to become a forgotten legend. To understand why anyone would bolt a giant aircraft propeller to a train, you have to look at the obsession of the 1930s. It was the age of speed. The world was accelerating, cars were getting faster, airplanes were crossing oceans. But the railways were stuck in the past. Steam locomotives were magnificent beasts, but they were dinosaurs. They were heavy. They were inefficient. To go faster, they had to be built bigger, and the bigger they got, the harder they pounded the tracks, destroying the very rails they rode on. A German engineer named Franz Kruckenberg looked at these iron giants and saw a dead end. Kruckenberg was not a traditional railroad man. He was an airship designer. He had spent his life designing Zeppelins, thinking about aerodynamics, about how to slip through the air with the least amount of resistance. He believed that the future of rail travel wasn't about raw power, it was about shape. He looked at the square, blocky trains of his day and realized they were pushing a wall of air in front of them. He wanted to build something that cut through the atmosphere like a knife. He went to the drawing board and sketched a design that looked insane to the conservative railway bosses of the time. He wanted to build a fuselage on wheels, a train that was built like a Zeppelin airship. It would be lightweight. It would be streamlined. It would be covered in canvas and aluminum skin instead of heavy steel plates. But the biggest problem was the engine. Steam engines were too heavy. Diesel engines of that era were too slow and heavy as well. So Kruckenberg did the only logical thing a mad genius would do. He went to BMW and bought an aircraft engine. The machine that rolled out of the workshop in Hanover was unlike anything the world had ever seen. It was 85 feet long, but it weighed only 20 tons. To put that in perspective, that is lighter than a single empty carriage of a normal steam train. The interior was shocking to the public. It wasn't dark, industrial, and cramped like a normal train. It was modern. It had luxurious Bauhaus furniture, large windows, and a suspension system that made it glide over the rails rather than roll. But the business end was at the back. Kruckenberg mounted the massive BMW 12-cylinder aircraft engine, the same type used in German bombers, at the very rear of the train. He did something brilliant with the engineering. He tilted the engine upwards at a 7-degree angle. This was a crucial trick. The thrust from the propeller didn't just push the train forward, the angle actually pushed the train down onto the tracks. This gave it grip and stability without needing tons of dead weight. And then there was the propeller itself. It was a work of art carved from solid ash wood. Initially it had 2 blades, but later they changed it to 4. It measured nearly 10 feet across. When the pilot fired up the engine, the propeller didn't just spin, it screamed. There was no transmission connecting the engine to the wheels. The wheels were just there to keep it off the ground. The train was literally blown along the tracks by pure thrust. Critics called it a death trap. They said a light train would fly off the rails at the first curve. They said the propeller was a guillotine waiting to happen. Kruckenberg ignored them. He was ready to prove them wrong. On the morning of June 21st, 1931, the rail Zeppelin sat on the tracks between Hamburg and Berlin. This was the perfect hunting ground for a record. A 160-mile stretch of straight, flat track. Kruckenberg climbed into the cockpit at the front. He didn't have a steering wheel, he had a throttle lever, just like a pilot. He engaged the engine. The wooden propeller at the back blurred into a solid disc. The silver machine began to move. A steam train accelerates with violence, chugging, jerking and slipping. The rail Zeppelin accelerated with a smooth, terrifying surge. Within minutes, they were passing 60 miles per hour, then 80, then 100. The telegraph poles outside turned into a solid wall of wood. The people standing by the track saw only a silver blur and felt a blast of wind that tore hats from heads. Inside the cabin, it was surprisingly quiet. The noise was all behind them, drifting away in the slipstream. Kruckenberg pushed the BMW engine to full power. The speedometer climbed, 120, 130. At the peak of the run, the rail Zeppelin hit 143 miles per hour. That is 230 kilometers per hour. To put that in perspective, it would take another 24 years for a conventional electric train to beat that speed, and it would take 40 years for a petrol-powered train to beat it. It was a triumph. The public went wild. They nicknamed it the Silver Minnow. It appeared on postage stamps. It was the symbol of the future. It seemed like the age of steam was over, and the age of the propeller train had begun. But as the train pulled into the station after its record run, the victory began to unravel. The engineering was perfect, but the reality was a logistical nightmare. Kruckenberg had solved the problem of speed, but he had completely forgotten the problem of safety in the real world. A propeller is a fantastic way to move a vehicle in the open sky where there are no people. It is a terrible way to move a vehicle in a crowded train station. Imagine the rail Zeppelin arriving at a busy platform in Berlin. The massive wooden blades are still spinning at the rear to taxi the train. The prop wash, the wind generated by the engine, was hurricane force. It blew luggage off carts. It kicked up clouds of coal dust and sharp rocks, blinding passengers and chipping the paint off nearby trains. And the danger was obvious. If a passenger walked behind the train, or if a railway worker got too close while checking the signals, there would be no survival. The propeller was an exposed meat grinder. The German railway authorities looked at the spinning blades and saw a liability nightmare. They couldn't ban people from walking on the tracks in every small village station. There were other problems too. Trains are useful because you can couple wagons together. If you have more passengers, you simply add more cars. It is flexible. But the rail Zeppelin had a giant propeller on its tail. You couldn't attach anything to it. It was a lone wolf. It could carry 40 passengers, and that was it. If 41 people wanted to travel, you were out of luck. It was a high-speed VIP taxi, not a mass transit solution. The railways needed workhorses that could haul coal, timber, and hundreds of people. They didn't need a delicate racehorse that couldn't pull a trailer. Furthermore, the rail Zeppelin struggled with hills. Because it relied on air thrust, it had poor acceleration from a standstill on steep gradients. Unlike a wheel-driven train that can grind its way up a hill, the propeller just churned the air. It needed a running start. By 1934, the excitement had faded. The German Reichsbahn decided to go with diesel-electric trains instead. The famous flying hamburger train entered service. It was slower than the Zeppelin, but it didn't have a giant blender on the back, and it could pull wagons. The beautiful silver bullet was parked in a shed. Kruckenberg didn't give up immediately. He cut off the beautiful nose. He removed the propeller. He installed a fluid transmission to power the front wheels. In this new form, the train continued to test high-speed concepts, but its soul was gone. Then came 1939. The dark clouds of World War II gathered over Germany. The Nazi war machine was hungry for materials. They needed aluminum to build Messerschmitt fighters. They needed engines for Heinkel bombers. The rail Zeppelin was seen as a waste of precious metal. The order was given. The rail Zeppelin was dismantled. The beautiful silver skin was stripped and melted down. The BMW engine was repurposed for the Luftwaffe. The wooden propeller likely rotted away in a scrap heap. The fastest train in the world was recycled into weapons of war. Today, nothing remains of the rail Zeppelin, not a single bolt. Only grainy black and white photos and a few scale models exist to prove it was real. But if you look closely at a modern high-speed train, the Japanese Shinkansen or the German ice, you will see the ghost of the Zeppelin. The aerodynamic nose, the lightweight aluminum body, the low center of gravity. Franz Kruckenberg was right about everything. He was just wrong about the propeller. He proved that trains didn't have to be heavy iron monsters. He showed us that they could fly, even if they never left the ground. So the next time you step onto a high-speed train and watch the world blur past in silence, remember the silver minnow. Remember the roar of the aircraft engine and the spinning wooden blades that once terrified the stations of Germany. It was a failure, yes, but it was the most magnificent failure in railroad history.